Hi guys, today's story is the classic fairy tale The Ugly Duckling, a story about growing up and not always fitting in. Let's have a read. The Ugly Duckling, written by Hans Christian Andersen and illustrated by Pirrko, Vainio. The countryside was beautiful just then, for it was summer. The wheat was golden, the oats were green, and the hay was stacked in the meadows. On the bank of a river, hidden well in the tall grass, was a duck's nest. The mother duck had been sitting on it for some time now, and she was growing impatient. At last, one after another, the eggs began to crack, and the little yellow ducklings popped out. Quack, 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 they cried. Just one egg, the largest of them all, remained. Finally, the big egg cracked. Out tumbled a large gray duckling. The mother duck eyed it suspiciously. What sort of ugly duckling was this? She wondered. It certainly looked nothing like any of the others. Perhaps it was a turkey chick? The next day, the mother duck took her whole family to the water. The little ducklings dived and splashed, and the ugly duckling swam best of all. No, this cannot be a turkey chick, said the mother duck. He swims far too beautifully for a turkey. He must be my own child, after all, and rather handsome at that. After their swim, the mother took her ducklings to the poultry yard, where they could be properly admired. Step lively, she told her brood. Look sharp, don't turn your toes in. Quack clearly now, that's it. The little ducklings did as they were told, and they looked very smart indeed. But the other ducks hissed. Here's an odd one, the hens chucked. Here's an odd one, the hens clucked. Just look at that ugly duckling, we don't want him here. And a big duck bit him right in the neck. Leave him alone, said the mother duck. He's doing no harm. That may be, said the big duck, but he is so ugly, he deserves to be bitten. After that, the poor duckling was bitten and pushed and made fun of day after day after day until he didn't know which way to turn. Finally, worn out with being picked on, the duckling decided to run away. Down the hill he ran until he came to a great marsh where the wild ducks lived. Maybe he belonged with them. The little duckling tried to be friendly, but it was no use. What an ugly duckling! Exclaimed Mrs. Mallard. Just ignore him, said Mr. Mallard. Other birds lived in the marsh too, but they swam away from the little duckling. No matter what he did, he could not find any friends. Suddenly, bang, bang! Shots rang out, and 2 wild geese fell from the sky. The little duckling was terrified. He hid in the grasses and trembled while gunshots echoed all around him. Late in the day, the shooting stopped, but the duckling was still too frightened to move. He waited a few hours more, then hurried away from the marsh as fast as he could. Toward evening, he came to a cottage. By then, a cold wind was howling, but luckily the door was ajar, so the duckling slipped inside. An old woman lived in the house with her cat and her hen. She was very surprised to find that a strange duckling had moved in as well. But duck eggs were a real treat, so she let the duckling stay. He was sure to lay eggs soon, she thought. But when after 3 weeks the duckling had not laid a single egg, the old woman grew annoyed. It can't even lay an egg, said the haughty hen. What a useless duck, agreed the cat, and it hissed and spat at the poor lonely duckling. One day the door was left open again, and the duckling dashed through it and ran away. He wandered until he found a lake, but there were no other ducks on it. Autumn had come, the sky was gray, and the leaves were falling. The wild ducks had all flown away. The little duckling was all alone. One evening, at sunset, the ugly duckling saw 7 large birds fly past. They were big and white and had lovely long necks. The little duckling had never seen anything so beautiful. He wanted to call out to the birds. He wanted to belong to them. He stretched out his neck, longing to fly away with them. But of course, His short wings weren't strong enough to fly. Winter came. The days grew colder and colder. Snow fell and covered the ground. The duckling had to paddle around in the lake to keep from freezing, and every day as the water turned to ice, the hole in which he swam grew smaller and smaller. Finally, worn out, the duckling stopped. That night, the water froze around him. In the morning, a farmer came along and saw him frozen there. He knocked a hole in the ice and carried the duckling home with him. For a long time, the duckling stayed in the farmer's barn with the cows and the chickens. But at last it was spring again. The weather turned warmer, the sun shone, and the flowers began to bloom. The duckling looked into the sky and felt a strange longing. One day, he saw the white birds return to the lake. He wished so hard to be with them and share their joy. Only he could fly. All at once, the duckling lifted his wings. They were much stronger now, and to his surprise, they lifted him easily into the sky. He was flying. He landed on the quiet water not far from the white birds. The poor duckling was afraid to get too close. He was so ugly. Surely they would chase him away. He bowed his head in shame. But what did he see reflected in the clear water? His own image. But he was no longer a clumsy gray duckling. He was a white bird like them. He was a swan. The other swans swam over to welcome him, and the duckling's heart swelled with joy. He thought of how he had been hated and despised, but it makes no difference where you hatch if you come from a swan's egg. Now he heard them say he was the most beautiful bird of all. The lilac bush bowed to him, and the sun shone warm on his feathers. He curved his graceful neck, and his heart cried out with joy. I never dreamed of such happiness when I was the ugly duckling. The end. I'm so happy that the ugly duckling felt at home in the end and felt beautiful in his own skin. But remember, guys, the ugly duckling was never actually very ugly. The only problem he had is that he was different from everyone around him, and no one else had seen something like him before. It's never okay to belittle or bully somebody for looking different than you. And the ugly duckling would have had a much happier life if he was being treated kindly by everybody. Remember, you might look or feel different now, but when you grow up, you're capable of being very powerful and very beautiful and very strong. So hang in there if you're having a hard time now. And if you're not the one who's having a hard time, make sure you're giving an easy time to the others. Until then, guys, I'll see you later. Keep your books close and your stories close. Bye.